Hello, TJ. You're actually our first interview for Kismet that we've done so in some form of face to face. The first one we did was with Premier Mohammed.
Yeah,
So,
I was looking at your website, looking through the articles and everything before I came onto here, and that was amazing. That's beautiful.
oh,
The website, I have to say, the website itself is just absolutely gorgeous. But still, yeah, that's
thank
really
you.
wonderful. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
It's truly a delight and a pleasure. I'll start off with reading your bio so that if anybody's tuning in to the video that we'll post and they don't know who you are,
Yeah.
they'll know who you are. So let me do that real quick. So TJ Klune is the New York Times and USA Today best-selling Lambda Literary Award-winning author of The House in the Cerulean Sea, Under the Whispering Door, In the Lives of Puppets, which is my personal favorite,
Thank
the
you.
Green Creek series for adults, the Extraordinary Series for teens, and more. Being queer himself, Klune believes it's important now more than ever to have accurate, positive queer representation in stories. Um, so with that out of the way, I thought we'd start with a little like grounding activity, specifically grounding us in location. Where am I talking to you from?
I am in Washington State. I live outside of a tiny town called Leavenworth, which is, if you know the name Leavenworth, you probably know that it's the town that celebrates Christmas 5 months out of the year. The whole town is styled like a Bavarian village, and they film Hallmark movies in this town and everything like that. And so I live 10 miles outside of that in a log cabin on acreage in the mountains.
Uh,
And it is absolutely wonderful. It is very cold and there's a lot of snow on the ground. I'm one of those people who said, "Hey, I want to go live in a log cabin in the woods," and said, "Okay, why not? Let's do it." So I did.
that's the dream, truly. Like a log cabin or a hobbit hole are like my vibe. So
Yeah,
yes,
yes, exactly.
that's lovely. I've already told you this, but I'm here in Bloomington, Indiana. It's not balmy here either. It's quite cold. Center of the Midwest here in a lovely little college town, and the basis for the magazine. So, um, I love asking this question. I asked Primi the same question, and I will probably ask every author we ever interview
Mhm.
the same question of what's the first piece of speculative media or book that you remember that got you like the hook? What was that hook for you?
It would be twofold. One, it would be like many people of my generation. I was born in the 80s, came of age in the 90s. I read Stephen King at far too young an age. My first book by him that I read was The Stand, the complete and uncut edition at age 11. Now, let me tell you, I didn't understand probably a good 80% of that book, but I remember being enthralled in ways that I didn't know books could make you feel enthralled in that way. The other thing that was probably even more formidable was a funny little show called The X-Files. In the early 90s, The X-Files came on. And you have to remember, I grew up in rural Oregon and in a very small, crappy little town, and we didn't have cable TV. We only had like three channels growing up, and one of those channels happened to have the X-Files, and I was not allowed to watch that. Oh boy, was I not allowed to watch that. But a fun thing that we had back in the 80s and 90s were VCRs, where you could record tapes and put it in, and nobody would know. Nobody would know because it was on at like 9 o'clock at night. Nobody was watching TV at nine
Hmm.
o'clock at night. So I would record those, and then when nobody was home, I would binge as many as I could before
Oh,
somebody caught me. It was I I will say it. Fox Mulder made me gay. I'm not. I'm proud of that. Yes, but Fox Mulder made me gay, and then Gillian Anderson made me go, well, maybe I don't know. No, Fox Mulder, I'm gay. So yeah. So that those are the two pieces that were probably the most formidable for me.
yeah. The X Files can definitely comes off in this new book too. Well, new old book.
Yeah,
Uh,
new old book.
yeah,
Yeah, it does, man. This is like, okay, let's
yeah.
do it. We're gonna talk about it's like that meme with the guy from the History Channel. It's aliens. It's like, yes.
It was good. That I love that. That context makes the book even better. Um, the magazine we sort of throw everything under the same label, but I like asking people, um, How do you categorize your work? Do you think the word speculative fits it? Is that something you often use? If so, or what words do you use, and what purpose do you think those words serve?
Speculative fiction is probably my favorite term to use because it feels like an umbrella. It feels like there's a lot of things that can fit into it. It's when people try to pigeonhole me that I start having, I feel a little need to push back a little bit. Like for example, when The House in the Cerulean Sea came out in 2020, right at the beginning of the pandemic, it people read it more and more and more, and it became a really cool success story. And then I put out Under the Whispering Door, which dealt with grief and death and what that looked like. And people were like, oh, this is cozy too. And
Mm,
then people were like, In the Lives of Puppets came out, which dealt with the genocide of the human race. And people are like, this is cozy. And I'm like, no, it's not- that's that. Look, there's nothing wrong with labels. Absolutely nothing wrong with labels. You can call something whatever you want. I don't like the term cozy fiction for
mm,
somebody describing it about me. There are many, many amazing authors who fit that label and love that label and want to continue that label. Not me.
yeah.
That's not because, I'm an author. I'm evolving. I'm iterating. I'm not going to write the same thing twice, and
Mm,
I don't ever want to write the same thing twice. So I try to push back at that. And look, science fiction, fantasy, that could be a catch-all too, but that's what I grew up reading. That's what I
mhm.
grew up wanting to write. And so I think of myself foremost as a sci-fi author, science fiction, fantasy author, but I also understand speculative fiction is probably the best thing for it.
Yeah, yeah. I That's so funny. I would never describe In the Lives of Puppets as cozy whatsoever.
No, no,
And that's
it's not. I
that's
mean, look, again, if you want to call it that, that's fine. And that's if that book makes you feel cozy, that's fine. One of my favorite comfort shows is Breaking Bad, so I totally
oh,
get the weirdness
oh,
of it. But like, it's not. You know what? It is what it is. You can't you roll the punches. Look, man, that book was a success, so I'm happy. Call it whatever you want. That's totally fine with
yeah.
me.
Yeah, no, it's that's funny. I haven't heard anyone but that I feel like that is often a thing in the genre these days that there are these large labels like cozy fantasy or like dark fantasy or
Or romantasy, which is the new catch-all for things that have been
yeah,
around for decades and decades and
yep.
decades. But they put the two words together and oh, look, it's on social media now. It's a big new thing. I'm like, well, okay, but look, man, did you not read those fantasy books in the 80s and 90s with like Fabio-like covers and everything like that? That was the whole thing. Look, come on,
Yeah.
man.
No, I take personal issue with the word solar punk in my I have a non-fic piece I published with the magazine where I talk
Hmm.
about I talk about that. You see, I get it. Um, so growing up, this is a continuation of, or as growing up as an author, as an adult, growing up as a kid, and also as a queer person. Who are those authors that you find yourself often looking towards throughout your life, who are doing like the good work, who are representing people broadly, or whatever you think of as the good work as well?
So look, I read a lot of horror. I
Mm,
read a lot of bad things happening to good people. I don't know why.
mm.
Especially, somebody's like, "Oh, this is the author of The House in the Cerulean Sea. I wonder what he likes to read." Well, when the ghosts or the monsters or the bad guys win, and everybody's sad or dead at the end of a horror novel. That is my favorite kind. But look, so growing up, I mentioned Stephen King. I read the only author I ever take a book off or a day off when a book comes out is Stephen King. I will
Mm,
sit when a book comes out, I'm up that morning with a fresh cup of tea and I will read that book all day. That is the only
mhm,
author I do that for. But I also have to give credit to authors like Diana Wynne Jones, who wrote
mm,
Howl's Moving Castle. I have to give credit to Terry Pratchett. I have to give
mm.
credit to Douglas Adams. I have to. Douglas Adams is somebody I wish I could be. I never,
Mm.
I'll be me. I'll be me, my own kind of author, but I love Douglas Adams' writing. I adore him. In the queer space, the very first queer book I read was when I was 16 years old. I came out to my librarian. She was the first person I ever came out to, and she gave me my very first book with gay characters in it. It was called The Front Runner by Patricia Nell Warren. Do you know this
Mm.
book?
I do not.
It is not a speculative fiction. It is a book it is considered the first commercial and critically successful gay novel. It was written in the 70s by a straight white woman named Patricia Nell Warren. And, not to spoil a 50-year-old book, but I'm going to anyways. The book follows Harlan, a coach, for a college running team, and one of his stars, Billy, who's training for the Olympics.
Mm,
And there it shows their relationship evolve over the course of the novel, the facing the bigotry of the 70s, not yet
mm.
HIV and AIDS. And the book ends with Billy in the Olympics getting shot in the head from the stands, being assassinated, and that's the end of the book. So imagine
God.
you are a queer person and you find
Oh.
queer people in books, and that's how it ends. Fast forward to 2011, I put out my first book with an independent publisher. It's not speculative fiction, it was a family drama with queer people in it. Who
Mm.
should reach out to me but Patricia Nell Warren? She said, I read your book, I loved it. So what did I do? I fangirled all over her. Like fangirled like you wouldn't believe. This was like Facebook 2011. I'm in direct messages with a literary icon and I'm freaking out. And I tell her that story I just told you, and I'll never forget what she said. Her response, I am so sorry. That was your first experience. To her credit,
Mm,
she realized how much a story like that had affected the queer community because it was very popular when it came out. And there was even a time when Paul Newman was optioned the rights to star in the movie as Harlan. um, she wrote two sequels that showed the fallout of that and how this
mm,
found family came back together and found hope and everything like that. And she continued writing amazing books up into her death a few years ago. And the reason I want to tell that story is because of how impactful, even
mm,
though it was tragic, even though it was tragedy, that kind of story impacted me so much that I wanted to write stories where that stuff didn't happen.
mm,
I proudly have a signed first edition of The Front Runner on my shelf because of how much that book meant to me.
mm. That's lovely. I mean, sad, lovely.
You're right, it is, but
Yeah.
even if it was sad, it still informed me as a person in my growth to want to tell stories about queer people being the heroes, being the villains, getting to go on adventures where, maybe they don't have to worry about getting shot in the head while they're
Yeah.
living their life.
Yeah. Um, wow. Pivoting to like a fun question with a context that's not fun. In the midst of this sort of world on fire we're currently living in,
Yeah.
and with books that just like burst with joy and delight, where outside of your writing are you finding joy these days?
So I kind of have to start with a bummer on that a little bit. On December 31st, the last day of 2024, I had to put my 17-year-old cat to sleep. And it was
Mm,
sad. She was elderly, but you know what? It was time to go.
yeah.
So, I was doing the grieving thing, where I didn't, you grieve. Losing a pet is akin to losing a family member. It really is. So I was in the grieving but life still has to go on when you're grieving. So I took my dog out and we were going for like the first long walk that we've been on in a few days because I was like, I'm sad, lay with me. And dog, pets know, they know, they're intuit somehow, they know. And so we get down there and he has this long leash that he's on. Somehow, without me paying attention, he gets it wrapped around my feet and then takes off running. And I fall flat on my ass in the middle of this snow-covered road down near my neighbor's house. There's people out there shoveling snow and they see this, and my dog proceeds to pull me about 10 feet down the road. And I'm not hurt. It's snow on the ground, so I'm not worried about that. But the absurdity of it just hit me, and I just started laughing. I just started laughing like you wouldn't believe. And my dog came over, started licking my face, and sat down right next to me. And even though we tend to anthropomorphize our pets, giving them human-like qualities, I swear to God, he was looking at me like, "See, dumbass, it's not that hard."
Mm,
And so that's something that has brought me joy is
mm,
realizing that yes, sad things happen, but you know what? Grief is something that you grow around. It never goes away. It's something that you grow around, you get bigger on, and you can celebrate the sad things,
mm,
even if they make you sad, but you can't forget how to be happy. You can't forget how to live. And so I did that by embarrassing myself in front of people I haven't even met yet. So I'm just, it helped me remember that yes, the world may be on fire, but for this one moment, in this tiny little corner of the world, everything is okay.
mm. That micro, yeah, and we'll pivot here in a second to this, but I think that's a very apparent in a lot of your books, specifically in The Bones Beneath My Skin, but in a lot of the stuff you write, like the moments of joy and delight are these small little things often,
Hmm.
where characters are wallowing in like a touch or a word or just appreciating a moment. So I love
Hmm.
that. Speaking of the new old book, for those who aren't familiar, if you could just rehash the story that you put in the acknowledgments of how this came to life, because I think that's so
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. So I was with an independent publisher from 2011 to 2018. And by that time, I was signed or getting ready to sign with Macmillan and Tor. So it wasn't I was not like saying I'm dumping this publisher for another publisher. It was something entirely else. We'll get to in a second. So gave them this book. Look, this book, I had this idea in 2015 of this. I wanted to put my own spin on a book like Stephen King's It or Robert McCammon's Boy's Life, which is about an adult novel about a group of kids, teenagers, tweens, whatever, who are sent or in a little town wanting to protect a little girl. What
Mm,
happened? And I didn't start writing anything, but what happened uh, uh, the next year? A show called Stranger Things came out, and I was like, oh well, shit. So I kind of put that on the back burner, but then I started thinking about stuff from when I was a kid. E.T., Escape from Witch Mountain,
mhm.
all of these little, the X-Files, obviously, big, huge, obviously influential. And then I started thinking about how the 90s were the weirdest time, at least that the one of the weirdest decades in history. We think of the 60s, we have an image of what it looks like. Same with the 70s, the 80s, the 2000s, 2010s. The 90s is weird. At the beginning of the 90s, nobody had cell phones, nobody had internet. By the end of the 90s, pretty much everybody had cell phone. Most people had internet. I think the 90s were the biggest technological leap in terms of the the spreading of technology that has ever occurred in the world, for better and for much worse, because when you get that kind of immediate connection to everybody in the world, that means that people who have had somewhat strange or deranged thoughts can actually find other people who think of them on the same wavelength. If you want a recent example of this, think of QAnon in the United
Mm,
States. You think of
mhm.
how they sprung up from the internet and all of that kind of stuff. So I then stumbled upon, while thinking about the 90s and thinking about what events happened in the 90s, I stumbled upon something that I hadn't thought of for years. And that was in the late 90s, or in the mid to late 90s, there was a cult called Heaven's Gate. Heaven's Gate had a leader called Marshall Applewhite. You can still look up Marshall Applewhite's videos today. He was very charismatic, very strange looking. He had ears that stuck out very far. He had a very bald, tanned head and very wide, like eyes that look like they belong in like a feral cat. And it just extraordinary. There, long story short, they believed that in this comet called Hale-Bopp that was crossing over the Earth, that was passing by the Earth, that there was an alien spaceship in the comet tail, and that they would ascend to the spaceship. So how did they end up doing that? Mass suicide. At the time, you have to think about this, the 90s, you had this, you had David Koresh, you had, in recent memory, you had Jim Jones, you had all of these cult-like mentalities, cult figures. And the worst thing, or the best thing, worst thing about being an author is two words: what if?
Mm.
What if? Because then my brain was like, oh man, that's crazy. What if they were right though? Like, what if there was something there? Like, what if they, because I'm fascinated by the psychology of cults. I'm fascinated by
Yeah.
by charismatic people who can do basically take over the will of others. So I poured all of this into this book. And I sent it to this publisher, my publisher, and they said, okay, sure, we'll publish it. And then I get a message that I was not intended to see. This message
Oh
was to my
no.
editor, and it said, here's TJ Klune's new book. This one is weird even for him. And look, man, so as a kid, all I heard from people was that I was weird, used
Mm.
as pejorative. I heard that from my parents. I heard that from family members. I heard that from teachers. I heard that from people in that I went to school with. I was the weird kid. I wasn't Travis Klune. I was Travis Clown. That was how I was seen. I was a kid, this slightly effeminate kid with undiagnosed ADHD in rural Oregon in the 80s and 90s trying to survive.
Yeah.
So weird. That I was weird. I was the weird kid. So I have always taken when I was younger, I took offense at that word. But as I got older, I realized my weirdness is cool. My weirdness
Mm.
is my imagination. My weirdness has given me all these wonderful gifts that I've been able to write stories and tell other people. So I said, you know what? Screw you guys.
Mm.
I'm taking this back. And so I took the book back, and unbeknownst to me, that started an avalanche that we don't need to go into all the details, but essentially this publisher started embezzling money, or had been embezzling money from authors, editors, cover artists, and used one of my books to finance that operation that I was unaware of. So what that meant was I had to take 20 plus novels that I had written for them away from them, self publish them at the same time I was self publishing The Bones Beneath My Skin. So The Bones Beneath My Skin got lost in all that noise with the drama of the publisher, with
Mm.
publishing 30, like 20 something books, with me saying, hey, by the way, I just signed with Macmillan and Tor. Hooray! And then House in the Cerulean Sea came out, Under the Whispering Door came out. Tor came to me and said, we want to publish your backlist. And I said, well, let's start with the Green Creek series, which has emotionally devastated so many people. Let's ruin even more lives. And I also said, I have this book that is very important to me. It is called The Bones Beneath My Skin. I love it to pieces. It did not get a fair chance. Will you do this one? And they said yes. And here we are, 2 years later.
Well, I finished it last night and I was weeping towards the end of the book. I pulled out stickies. It is true. I understand why you wanted to give it a second shot because it definitely deserved it. It is lovely.
Thank you.
Um,
Thank you. I people who've only read my most recent books, House in the Cerulean Sea, Under the Whispering Door, In the Lives of Puppets, thank you. Thank you for doing that. If you've not read this book is me showing you a different kind of writing by still being a TJ Klune book.
mm,
There's still people coming together who aren't related and fighting to change the world on a different scale than we're normally used to. But this is me just showing you that I'm not going to be some one trick pony. I want to stretch my wings. I want to do different things from here on out.
yeah,
I'm never going to be the world's best writer, but I don't want to be. I just want to get a little bit better each and every day.
yeah. There was a really great moment in the book that I think highlighted something you just said that I loved, and it was a lot of these you know I think in all the ones that all the stories I really love by you and a lot of authors, I think often the penultimate thing is not world ending. The thing that gets saved in the end is one small thing. And there's a
Hmm.
moment where Nate is trying. He's like, "What about all these other instances of this that might be happening?"
Hmm.
And Alex is like, "No, no, no. We're here right now with her. We're saving her. This is it.
Hmm.
This is all we're doing." And I love that. It was so grounding and it was beautiful and it's one of those moments where like in this world again on fire, often we have to realize that the things we can do are the things in front of us, one small thing at a time.
Right,
Um,
because like it goes into in like the House in the Cerulean Sea books, it takes just a
mm,
few people coming together to make change. It really does,
mhm,
and The Bones Beneath My Skin tackles that in a completely different direction.
yeah,
But it's this idea, yes, in a world on fire that we live in now, when things just seem to be getting progressively worse, we can come together to enact change, to impact change, to protect other people's, especially in marginalized communities, man. I mean, you're
mm,
going to be looking at a lot of transphobia. You're going to be looking at probably rising homophobia, but you're also going to be looking at a very distinct rise in racism.
yeah,
And it's going to get ugly, but we have to remember that we are so much stronger together than we ever are apart. And it can feel like we're at disparate times that we want to be separated, but man, we got to come together to survive. That's what you
yeah,
got to do.
yeah. I will say at the end of this book, it's often with stories, but this one specifically was the first one with yours that I was like, I need to know more. With House on the Cerulean Sea, I was so happy. I mean, you wrote a sequel,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
lovely, but House on the Cerulean Sea is so sweet, and it has such a lovely ending that I got to the end and I was like, okay, this is
yeah.
lovely. I can imagine what's gonna happen myself.
Hmm.
With this one, I got to the end, I'm like, I want to know, and you give us a nice little taste.
Yeah.
Um,
A
I
denouement,
guess,
right? Yeah.
how do you decide when a story's done? Like, where's the, yeah, how do you decide that? When do you stop
So
telling the story that is obviously going to keep going somehow?
yeah, so like I know in the Lives of Puppets Under the Whispering Door are never going to have sequels. It's like I know Bones
Mm,
Beneath My Skin will never have a sequel. It's why I know that most of my books going forward from here on out will not be sequels. And the reason I wrote a sequel to The House in the Cerulean Sea was A, because I wanted to speak out about the rising anti-trans movement
mm,
that is still occurring in the United States, but was reaching some really weird fever pitches
yeah.
in the 2020s or the 2016 to 2024. I mean, now we see that our current president has said the United States only has two genders, which I'm like, okay, that's whatever, regardless. So
Yeah.
whatever. But I wrote that book because I wanted to put like the goodness out into the world. And the sequel, the reason the sequel exists is because I wanted to continue that story, but also because Chauncey lives rent free in my head. I
Mm.
hear his voice all the time in my head. Chauncey's a character from those two books. And when he wants me to do more, I do more. I help me, please. He's taken over my brain. It's bad. But I know when a story is done, when I finish it and I realize that I don't feel anything is missing from me. The bones beneath my skin, I won't spoil the ending here, but that
Mm,
denouement, especially how it opens versus to how it closes, to me, it feels like that's it. That's
yeah.
done. There's nothing more that I can do. What happens next? I love reading books where I want to know what happens next, but I can imagine what it is in my own head.
Yeah.
I can imagine all the cool things. I'm the author, so they might be a little bit more canon than most people's imaginings, but I know what you're talking about. I know when you get to an end of a book and you're like, that was exactly what I needed it to end. Now I can think about what would happen next and make it up in my own head.
Yeah, there's a great example of this happening to me where like sometimes I'm just so satisfied. When I read Divergent, I remember like the librarian at the school at the in the public library that I often frequented.
Hmm.
She knew I loved dystopian books at the time, so she would save all the new ones for me. So she saved that. When I read it, I devoured it. I was like, "Oh my God, this is the best thing that's ever been written." And I got to the end, I'm like, "This is perfect. I know what's going to happen
Hmm.
next. They're going to revolt. Things are going to be fine." And then, like years later, I turn around and there's two sequels to it that I didn't know existed. I'm like, "What happened? I thought we were done." She surprised me, caught me off guard. But yeah, no,
Man,
and I always say
that YA dystopian boom, we were eating good.
we
It
were.
was
There were
good
some. I mean,
times. It was
Unwind was
good
another one.
times.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It was good. It was really good. It was fun. I enjoyed that.
it died. Like it's definitely died too. I mean, I work in a bookstore and I see the
Yeah.
YA that's coming in, and we just don't. It doesn't exist anymore. It's bizarre.
Yeah. It's just, it's trends. It's how
Yeah.
trends work. 2020, 2021, 2022, cozy fantasy, 2023, 2024, now romantasy. It's
Mm.
how it is. And then I'm just sitting over here like, hey, I wrote a book about a vacuum cleaner with social anxiety. So,
Ah. It was delightful too.
no, thank you.
Uh, so you do something really magical in a lot of your books that I sort of want to ask how. Because I mean, this one is a great example of it, and I think in the Lives of Puppets is another one where there's a lot of heartbreak, and in the Lives of Puppet, I think is a little more tragic because of the way it ends.
Yeah.
But you find in the middle of the heartbreak, and I say heartbreak because this book emphasizes that. Um, you find delight and you find joy. And how do you strike a balance as an author? Like a compelling story where there is this heartbreak that's going to move the story forward, but also how do you find that balance to keep the joy and the happiness so that like the joy isn't sickly sweet and the delight is or
Right.
and the pain isn't like too much.
Right. So I mean, we've all read books that are intentionally oppressive,
Mm,
that do not have even a glimmer of joy and stuff in there. We know going in, but to me, I can't write like that. I can't read. I don't want to be like that.
mm,
Even in the darkest moments, there needs to be some levity. There has to be something that makes you feel like, okay, even though everything has gone to shit, this is something stupid that we're laughing over, or here's something that we're learning new about each other, or whatever else is going on. I feel it's important, especially when discussing things like that are omnipresent in this book, grief specifically. Grief is very present in this book, and it's important to me to give scenes of grief room to breathe,
Mm,
because you want when you're reading about grief, even though grief is universal, no two people experience grief the same way. And it's you get to walk in this other person's shoes for a little bit, watch how they grieve, what their grieving process is like. And maybe you can relate to it, but maybe you can't. But at that moment, you are with that person in their grief. To undercut it immediately with a joke is it would be disingenuous to the moment itself. But when you can add in little sprinkles of light, it doesn't even need to be humor. We can bring in little sprinkles of light. It doesn't make the heaviness feel as heavy. It reminds
yeah,
you that these, even though these characters aren't real, they can still feel like real breathing people. And we laugh at the worst times when it comes to horror, when it comes to grief, when it comes to sadness. The human reaction is very weird in moments like that. So even when something is sad or heartbreaking, there might be a moment where laughter is necessary because it's absurd. That's what life is, absurd. And if we can't laugh at that absurdity, what are we even doing? And this is not to shade on authors who write. Like, in fantasy, we have the term grimdark for
mm,
people who write. Think of Game of Thrones. While George R. R. Martin does have a very clever turn of phrase, and he is a very funny writer, I think. It's not meant to be humorous. They're meant to be like, oh, this person is sleeping with his sister. Let's go cut off heads. And that's what the that's what. So it's not meant to be like that. And I think life is absurd. If you're not crying, then you should be laughing.
yeah. Yeah, I think, and you follow into this like lineage that I really love. I think other modern examples are Star Trek Discovery did a really good. I don't know if you're a
Oh
Star
yeah.
Trek fan,
That's
but
that's flattering. Thank you.
well, yeah, you follow this lineage of this new wave of queer media that does this really good job of giving the queer people something to root for, some sort of
I
speculative world where we're winning. I think that the story with the doctor,
mhm.
and his husband, like that
Yep.
that I mean, one of my favorite things in Star Trek, I think in general, I've watched since I was a kid, and
Well,
truly,
but
I
yeah, but
think,
good thing is Star Trek has always been way more progressive
yeah,
than
oh yeah,
than people remember or even give it credit for. It
yeah.
has always been like that, and it just keeps getting better with how they do it. I just to have that comparison made, that's very flattering. Thank you. I love that show.
I I do too. And I think it's specifically that Chuck Tingle also has a great bury the gays, like that trope that
I
we that
love him. I was in the audiobook. I love that. I was
Oh,
one of
I
the
didn't know that.
narrators in the audiobook. Yeah, it was one of the I got to play a TMZ reporter, or like one of the TMZ type heads, and also a sheriff or something. It was fun. It
Oh,
was fun. He just got nominated, or they just got nominated for an Audie Award for that too. So that's very
yeah,
cool. My name is
but
on there for some reason, so if we win, I count that as for me.
I do truly love this idea that gay people can be happy even in the midst of bad things.
And gay
And so
people can
I
also, like, I'm glad you brought up Chuck Tingle, because queer people can also revel in the
yeah.
absurdity. Nobody
Oh
does it
yeah.
better than Chuck Tingle. He's one of my favorite people in the world.
I love the pink mask too. It's like such a performance thing of like showing up.
Have you gotten to meet him in person?
I've not yet. It's like a
Oh my
goal.
God, he is so fun. I actually get to call him my friend, which is, if you had told me that like 10 years ago, I would be like crying right now because I've gotten to do live shows with him. He's done stuff on
Oh,
tour with me. We've done panels and all that stuff together. Everything you think that he would be, he is and more. He's just a delightful human being. And if you can get him to do this, you would be thrilled. As a matter of fact, I should tell him to do this. That
oh,
would
I
be
would love
amazing.
that. If you could
Yeah.
connect us, I would.
Yeah,
That would be lovely.
absolutely. Yeah.
Um, yeah, no, but I truly I love that we're bearing the trope of bearing the gaze. So,
Mm-hmm. Because that still occurs even today. That
yeah,
that
yeah,
still occurs even today. That, I mean, you
yeah,
can't, burying your gays, fridging lesbians, all that kind of thing. That
yeah.
still happens in fiction today.
And now we're bashing back against it, which is
Oh
lovely.
yeah.
Um, so this is such a it's like trying to pick a and this is I'm not gonna make you pick your favorite book, um, but
Mhm.
this is like that thing where everyone has their favorite kid. Do you have a quote or a scene? I know I can think of moments from your books that I just adored. Do you have a favorite quote or scene that you've written where you're like, oh my God, that's like one of the best things I've ever put pen to paper for?
So do you want me to do this seriously, or do you want me to do it with something that I love that just actually made me laugh?
How about
Because,
both? Give me both.
okay,
I'll take
yeah,
them.
yeah. So there is, in to keep it relevant, there is a scene in The Bones Beneath My Skin, where Art talks about how we are all made of stardust. And she gives a tiny little speech at this moment at a very necessary time. And I was really proud of myself for those words that she wrote in there. How she basically yeah, there you go.
It's
Yeah,
the
you got
page
it.
I flagged.
Yeah. How she basically brings the title into play and what it means.
Yeah.
And I love that moment because it is such a human moment for such an inhuman character. And I
Hmm.
adore that. I adore that moment. Now, I rarely get high on my own supply, meaning I don't make myself laugh when I'm writing, but I swear to God, the stupidest thing made me laugh. So when so dumb. When in the Lives of Puppets, when there's a dick joke and Rambo pushes out a little pipe. It says, "Yay, I'm endowed." It's just Rambo, by
Some
the
of
way, is a social anxiety filled Roomba vacuum cleaner who is just one. I have readers who have made me my own little Rambos. I have somebody who knit me a Nurse Ratched. I have all of In the Lives of Puppets is one of my favorite things I've ever done. And just the fact that so many people were like, hey, let me continue to make you other Rambo things and everything like that. I'm like, hell yeah, man. Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Let's do this. Hell yeah.
no, truly. I mean, I think that the jokes by the robots or like inhuman characters, I think I'm just prone to like non-human beings.
Yeah, me too.
Like
Me too.
Data and Seven of Nine are some of
Yeah.
my
Oh yeah,
favorite.
yeah,
But
yeah.
like in the Lives of Puppets, it truly the robots I think were the part that just made me love the book beyond more
Yeah.
anything. So yeah.
I mean, because it's like it's okay, you want to keep on going that one. I thought I was the shit when I came up with the acronym for Nurse Ratchet's name when using her characters. When I've started doing that out, by the time I got done and figured out what it was supposed to be, I remember I sat back in my chair going, yeah, I did that.
Oh, I love that. Have you read John Wiswell's his new like romantic horror fantasy book?
No,
Someone I can build or someone you can build a nest inside. It's
no, that is a perfect title. Oh my God.
and it will so the main character Shasheshan is this amorphous monster blob
Uh-huh.
who's fall throughout the at the beginning of the book is like falling into this really complex political landscape where she is supposedly the dragon that everyone's trying to kill
Uh-huh.
and ends up befriending a human and the relationship between the human and Shasheshan as Shasheshan tries to figure out what it means to be human and to feel
Uh-huh.
things is just beautiful. So another example of somebody I think that
I'm gonna
he
read
would
that
find
now. That
yeah,
title is
it's
amazing.
John Wiswell's delightful. And that book is, yeah, it came out this past year and it was one of my favorite reads of the year,
Okay,
actually. It
I'll
was
get
just,
that.
um,
Okay.
so other than, the media we've talked about already, what are things you're watching these days that inspire you or just that you're enjoying or reading or listening to? What's the media
So
that TJ Klune consumes?
I am so you know how you get those wraps at the end of the year for your music playlist and it
Mm.
tells you this is what you've been listening to the whole time. Mine basically said, "Wow, TJ, all you do is listen to Florence and the Machine over and over and over again. And look, this one time you were addicted to a song by Bastille for like 6 weeks and you listened to only that one song that whole time." So I've seen Florence and the Machine like live like
Oh.
3 times. I will she is my, what do the kids say these days? She is mother.
Mm,
Oh my God, I'm so old. Oh, that hurt.
hmm
She's my favorite thing she's just my favorite. I am a book I'm reading right now that I am just absolutely in love with and flabbergasted by. It's a horror novel called Clown in the Cornfield. And it is a YA novel. Hold on, let me pull it up here. That doesn't really feel YA. It's by Adam Cesare, Cesare, and it's the first book in a trilogy. And let me tell you, if you can guess what the book is about by the title, you would be right. And it is so good. It is basically like a 90s slasher movie
Oh.
with I mean, right now, I mean, just a little bit ago, the stupid, idiot, racist, homophobic jock in this high school just got, and I was like, yes, you take that. Tucker.
Oh, I love some good wish fulfillment in an old like slasher.
Yeah, and
Anything.
it's fun. It's fun. I mean, the 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 book it plays it takes itself none too seriously, and I'm having a absolute blast with it. In terms of what am I watching on television right now? Oh, you know what? I just finished rewatching The Good Place because that
Oh.
show is I watched it live when it was on. I
Mhm.
because I love Mike Schur who does Park and Recs. And so I watched it live when it was on and it just destroyed me,
Yeah.
obviously. And so I rewatched it to see if I would have the same effect. It hurt even worse the second time. I think the ending of that show is probably the best depiction of what I think the afterlife is like, and I think it's one of the
Mm.
best finales of any show that has ever been written. It was absolutely pitch perfect. I adored everything about that. And my brother is trying to convince me to watch the new Game of Thrones show that's on,
Oh.
but then he convinced me to watch the Game of Thrones the first time, and then season 7 and 8 happened, and I will never take a recommendation from him again. So, like he
Spoiled.
was right before season 7 came out. He was like, "I need you to watch this so we can talk about it." I was like, "Fine." So I binged like six seasons, and I was like, "Hell yeah, this is pretty good. This is all right. I get with this." And the last 2 seasons, I was like, "You motherfucker." What is this?
Oh yeah, it took a nosedive. And now there, poor George R. R. Martin has to figure out what happens to him now, you know?
Well, okay, but that book, I don't think it's coming out. I think
You mean
I
those
think
two
it's
books?
okay, sure. Yeah. I think it's going to be another situation where they bring in like Brandon Sanderson to like finish it after, the unfortunate many years off passing of Mr. Martin. But
Oh,
there are 2 more books. Are you kidding me? Are you for
yeah.
real? That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen.
Is it bad? I still hold hope. I mean, I'm not caught up, but
I'm no, you're not wrong for holding hope because hi, who read Patrick Rothfuss the first
I,
hello, who's still waiting?
yeah,
How long was I waiting for Stephen King to finish the Dark Tower series? Even though,
yeah.
and then it took him almost dying to actually be like, okay, I might as well finish these. So I
Oh,
get it. I absolutely get it. I absolutely get it. I will never
Pat
be that author.
Rothfuss.
You have my promise.
Thank you. I've got that in recording.
Yeah, you do. You have my promise. If I am ever going to write a sequel or a series, I will know how that sequel series ends and I will have it all planned out and nobody will stop me. I do not care.
Oh, yeah. I have the vendetta I hold right now is not George R. R. Martin, it is Pat Rothfuss. I read Wise Man's Fear
Yeah, the
when it came
novella.
out. Oh yeah, yeah. Is that the novella or is
Wait,
it the sequel?
no, no. What's the novella he just put out?
Oh, the new Bass novella. Yeah, I have it sitting
Yeah,
back there somewhere.
I
Um,
refuse.
I only bought it, and then we had it at the bookstore, and there were signed
Yeah.
copies, and I said, "Sure, um, sure, why not?" But I've been waiting since the second book came out, and I will
Yeah.
continue to wait.
Hmm.
I love his prose are just
It's
crazy.
wonderful. That's just it. It wouldn't have been as successful as it was in those first 2 books if it wasn't amazing
Yeah,
work. Like you can say
yeah,
whatever you want about Grimdark or George R. R. Martin. The reason Game of Thrones is so popular is because it's really good.
yeah.
It
It
reminds
is.
me of like Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, which is one of my favorite fantasy books of all
Oh,
time. It is my favorite. If you give me a book that is a brick and I open it and I can see footnotes on almost every page, I'm going to have a very good time. I'm going to have a very good time. Footnotes are my
yep.
crack.
Uh, it was actually that was my reread that was the first book of the year for me. I reread Jonathan Strange with Mr. Norrell,
Oh
and
God,
the
it's so
BBC show is
good.
so good.
I
I
haven't
just
watched
said,
it because I can
oh,
never I can't ever imagine anything an adaptation living up
they
to the book because that book is
Jonathan,
yeah
yeah,
because it's one season like 8 and it means BBC so it's like 6, 7, 8 episodes
yep.
at most and I just can't fathom how they would do that.
The characters are so like it's like they ripped them off the page. The story
Okay,
changes quite a bit.
fine.
The ending, like a lot of the last chunk of the book changes quite a bit. Like up to the war and all that stays pretty
Mhm.
much the same. But
Oh, does
I
it?
just read
Okay.
Pure Nessie for the first
Yeah,
time.
I
I
loved
did
it.
that for
I
my book
adored
club.
it. I
Oh, it's
adored it.
incredible.
I just need her to just spend another 15 years of her life, which however long it took her to write Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, to give me another one of those. I
Yes.
just want another one of those.
Did you see the New York Times article where she said she's working on something else in the world of Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell currently?
No.
I'm so glad I got to give you that news.
What?
Yeah,
That
so
is
she there's
so
a
good.
there's a New York Times article recently where she talked about her, her chronic illness and things like that. But then she
Yeah,
talks
yeah.
about what she's working on right now, and she's working on a horror book that we know nothing, very little about. And then
What?
she's working on this book in the world of Jonathan Strange and Mr.
Uh,
Norrell. So you're gonna have more footnotes,
we have
hopefully.
now you have to understand we have to live. We have to survive so we can see this stuff come out. We have to live so I can
I
read a horror novel by her. What the hell? That is
I
a
completely agree.
I
It's you should go.
now in my head I'm just picturing it like gothic as hell, and I just would love that. Oh god.
uh, I'll have somebody in my book club last night pointed out too. If you flip here an essay, if it's a person who had memories but then and knows they lost their
Yeah.
memories and is living through that book, it's a horror book, so it would be a really effective
Oh
horror.
Jesus.
Um,
I'll have to go reread that again.
like if
After
you
I get
flip the
done with
yeah.
Clowns in the Cornfield. Yes, I will go
Uh,
reread that.
so the last thing I have for you is just what's up next. I know you're about to go on tour,
Yeah, I'm
and
about to go. Bones Beneath My Skin comes out February 4th, and I will be going on a Midwest tour for this in the winter because all I've heard for the last 5 years is TJ, you never come to the Midwest. TJ, you never come to the Midwest. Well, guess what? I'm coming to the Midwest, so can't wait. Super excited. And after that, I'm doing something unorthodox. I'm not releasing any other book for the rest of the year. I get to take a little bit of a break. The reason being is some very cool things are coming up that I can't talk about quite yet. But I will say that for the next after starting in 2026, you're going to have a brand new novel for me a year for like 5 years. I already have
oh my
3 books
god,
fully written that haven't been announced yet, and I'm so excited about them. So it's just I get to have a little me time
yeah,
for in the next the latter half of this year because I've put out a book a year, at least a book a year since 2011. And mostly it's been 2 or 3 books a year, especially in the early days with indie. But with Tor republishing some of my older titles, I've had 2 or 3 books a year and I've been going nonstop. So I just want to take a nap
yeah.
and recharge. I'm in the middle of writing a new book right now and it is going super well. And I'm gonna take it as it comes and figure out what direction I want to go next. But I will say the finished books that I haven't announced yet, they're very good. They're very good. And they're very different from each other. They are so completely different. It is
Oh,
wild how different it's going to be. And I will say, maybe one day in the not too distant future, you might see a TJ Klune horror novel. So
oh, that I can't wait for.
I
Is
know.
is the same cover designer going to do your wonderful covers for these? Hopefully,
I believe, yeah, Chris Sickles. Oh yeah, he's
yeah.
if you are in Indiana, I think it's already all
Yeah.
sold out. But at the tour stop that I'm doing in Indiana for Bones Beneath My Skin, Chris is going to be my co-host at that show, and
Oh,
he's going to sell prints of his art from my books, so you can get your very own, Cerulean Sea cover, the Bones Beneath My Skin, the Green Creek covers, all of those. You can get those all for yourself. Chris is
now
one
I'm
of the most tremendously talented people I have ever known in my entire life. And for those who see my covers and think, oh, those are very pretty, what are they? There's 3D sets. Everything you see on the cover is hand built by him and set, and then he photographs them. So what you're seeing on the cover is photographs of the sets he's built. And I
oh,
actually have the house or the tea shop for Under the Whispering Door sitting on my desk right over there. He gifted it
that's
to me.
crazy.
When you press a button on the side, the fourth floor lights up where the door is. Hugo's little
Oh,
moped is sitting right out front. Yeah. Chris is disgustingly talented, and we should all be so grateful that we live at the same time as him.
that's
Absolutely.
that. tidbit about it being real models is actually something that I think has been like the final nail in the coffin for some people I'm hand selling your books to. I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, this about the book, and I'm like, yeah, and these they're really like the covers are so pretty. I'm like, they're real. Like these are
Yeah.
dioramas.
If you go to his Instagram, Red Nose Studios, he posts fly-throughs of each of the sets of
Mm.
the covers of the books he builds. And so you can see fly-throughs of every cover he's done for
Oh,
me. It's
that's
wonderful.
so cool.
He's an amazing man, and I have yet to meet him. We've talked many, many times, but I get to meet him for the first time on this book tour stop.
Now I'm
And
even madder. It sold out
I'm
before
gonna
I could get
fangirl
tickets.
on him. I'm gonna hug it. I'm gonna be like, Chris, thank you for my career. Thank you.
Oh, they're wonderful covers. Yeah,
Yeah.
Viewpoint. I think they sold out the day of, so I didn't even get the
Yeah,
chance
no,
to touch a ticket.
the this tour, my Somewhere Beyond the Sea tour last fall was very large. It was
Yeah.
many stops. It was just me on a stage giving a talk, and I think the largest audience we had was like 1,500, 2,000 people. With
Mm.
this, I wanted to keep it smaller because that's a lot of work and I'm very tired still. So yeah, we were doing somewhat smaller stops, and one of them is like 750. But
Oh.
it's
Mm.
people came out in droves in the Midwest and proved why they demanded me to come to Midwest. All those stops sold out like quick.
Yeah.
So I was very happy with that. Very happy. Thank you to the Midwest people for coming to see me.
Viewpoint is lovely. The owners there are great. They're friend. We know Viewpoint because I was the events person at the bookstore I work at here in town for a long time, and they were good people to get to know. So
Oh, good. I can't
yeah,
wait. Yeah, I've never done
yeah,
anything with them before, so I'm very excited. But they seem very, very thrilled that I get to come there, and I am too. So I'm very excited for it.
yeah. Awesome. Well, that's all the questions I have for you. So I think we're done with the interview portion.
Oh
Thank
my
you so
goodness.
much.
You are so great. Thank you so much for doing this. This has been wonderful.
Hello, Earthlings. Kismet editor in chief here, MJ Woods. And I want to thank you all for tuning into what will be hopefully the first of many Kismet broadcasts. We absolutely were so pleased that TJ agreed to an interview and want to thank him for his time and thoughtful words. Thanks to his publisher, Tor. And thank you to all the staff who make the magazine possible. Hopefully, we'll see you again soon with our next broadcast. Keep your eyes and ears peeled for what's coming up.